Hey guys, welcome back to OrmsTV. Today we have the all-new Panasonic S1 full-frame camera for you. We're doing a hands-on review, taking it out in the wild, seeing what this baby can do. Now, I'll preface this by saying this is a pre-production model, so things might still change. Some of the features in that might change, and you might not get quite the same performance as we're getting here. Hopefully, they'll bump it up a little bit, but we're going to shoot this unit, see what it can do. Come have a look. Okay guys, so we're back in the studio and we're going to review some images, and I'm going to give you a quick spec run through on the Panasonic S1. So Panasonic have actually released two units. So there's the S1 and the S1R. Now the S1 that we have here today runs a 24 megapixel full frame sensor, and the S1R runs a high resolution 47 megapixel sensor. Now those two resolution counts are very similar to what you get from the Z6 and Z7 from Nikon, and arguably it's probably a very similar sensor architecture that gets used in these two units. Now the S1 and the S1R both uses the Leica L-mount. So Leica L-mount mirrorless technology on this unit. Now that is what they call the L-mount alliance, and that's actually a very good thing, and I'll tell you why. At launch, this camera is going to come with 3 lenses. Potentially. So 24-105 f4, a 70-200 f4, and a 50mm 1.4. At the same time, there is also a good couple of Leica lenses available that will be compatible with this, but I don't really see a lot of people buying a Panasonic body and then spending Leica money on lenses. Just don't really see that happening. The good thing is though that Sigma is also part of this L-mount alliance, and Sigma have already committed that 14 of their lenses is going to be adapted to the L-mount by the end of 2019. And we think that that's pretty much going to be their entire range of art lenses, and that's going to be amazing because those lenses are incredible and actually pretty affordable. So that should make early adopters of the new Panasonic system pretty happy. Now the S1 and the S1R also feature both in-body and lens stabilization, so you're going to get that dual IS effect, and Panasonic says that that's good for up to 6.5 stops, which is amazing. In all of our testing thus far, it's performed really well, even when shooting video. It sometimes looks a little bit unnatural, but we'll show you that in a second. For stills though, absolutely magic. Then my favorite part, look at that. Dual memory card slots. Canon and Nikon, take note, pro mirrorless cameras can actually come with 2 memory card slots. You have one XQD and one SD card slot. The XQD slot will also be future compatible with CF Express, which is really, really good news. Now, on the S1, you have an ISO range that runs up to 204,800. The S1R, because of its higher megapixel sensor, is going to give you an ISO range up to 51,200, which is really, really good. I mean, nothing to complain about there. And we'll test out the low light just now and show you how that performs. Now, one thing that does get me down about this camera a little bit is the LCD screen. So if we just power it on here real quick, you'll see it is a tilting screen, but unfortunately it is not a flip out screen. Now Panasonic says this is a triaxial tilt screen, and it does that tilt out, which is, I believe, a Fuji design that Panasonic utilizes here. I'm not the biggest fan of it. It is a touch screen, and in menus and that, the touch functionality works really, really well. We have, however, found that in playback, when you're cycling through images, pinch zooming in, that kind of thing, it is very sluggish and it doesn't necessarily pick up properly, but that might just be because this is a pre-production firmware model. So we'll see how that performs when final production firmware is available on this unit, but it'll probably be sorted out. Okay, so let's quickly talk about video here. So again, I'm going to stress that this is a pre-production model, so any of these specs can change, and some of it might actually change just to bump the camera up a little bit. So right now you can shoot 4K video, H.264 and H.265. At the same time, you can also shoot 4K 60p 8-bit 420 internally, but that is with a 1.5 crop. Now, when this camera was announced first, last year, they said that it's going to shoot full frame 4K 60p. So we'd really like to see if they fix that in a future firmware update. Probably will, just to stick to the promises that they were. And if they do that, that will be the first camera that does full frame 4K 60p, you know, in this type of format, and that would be pretty amazing. Then the S1 can also shoot 4K 30p 10-bit in HEVC internally with hybrid log gamma. Then in terms of external video recording, pushes out via a full-size HDMI port, which is really handy. We really love it. But it is a little bit limiting at launch. So at the moment you only get 4K 30p 422 though, but only 8-bit when you push externally to a recorder. So following on that, Panasonic has already announced that there's going to be some paid updates for this camera. And one of the first ones that's going to come out is going to bolster your 4K video. So firstly, it's going to bump you up to shooting internally 4K 30p 422 10-bit and externally 4K 60p 422 10-bit, which is really good. Can't wait for that, but you know, paid for, I'm not too happy about that. Really should just be a free update. Another paid update, if you want to call it an update, is going to be the addition of Vlog. Now, Panasonic did the same thing with the GH5, and eventually with the GH5S it was included for free. But for now, on the S1 and the S1R, if you want Vlog, you're going to have to pay for it. Along with those paid updates, there is also already talk that in a future firmware update, Panasonic is going to add ProRes RAW external recording. So very exciting. Looking forward to that as well. Now let's talk about autofocus. Both the S1 and the S1R features 225 autofocus points, but it is only contrast detect. So there is no phase detect autofocus on this camera. And in our testing, we've already run into a couple of problems with that. If you're underexposing a little bit or in very low light conditions, the camera really struggles a bit to autofocus, where other cameras that has phase detect definitely performs better. At the same time, you also struggle a little bit with the tracking autofocus when you're shooting video. The contrast detect system just isn't quite as good as a phase detect autofocus system is going to be in that. But at the end of the day, if you're somebody who shoots manual focus, it's fine. You're really not going to notice it. Then in terms of this run through, I just quickly want to mention the ergonomics of this camera. You'll probably have noticed by now that it is quite big, but I haven't actually found that to be a bad thing. It's got a beautiful grip, fits my hand very nicely. The grip's a little bit taller than what you get on something like the Z6 and the Z7 from Nikon, and it's probably very similar in size to the Canon EOS R, which is my favorite grip at the moment of all of these full-frame mirrorless cameras. I don't get that pinky slip-off at the bottom. The body itself, magnesium alloy, so it's going to be super hardy. It's going to give you years of great performance out of it. Panasonic says it's fully weather sealed, so you really shouldn't have any issues with this camera if you're going to put it through its paces. On your left-hand side here, you've got your mode dial. That's very traditional. Right below that, your burst rate and your timer function. Shutter release over here, on-off button. And other than that, you have a dial at the front, dial at the back to do your aperture and shutter speed. All pretty traditional stuff, very well laid out. I pretty much picked it up and felt comfortable with it straight away. One thing that is a little bit unique is they have a little dial over here where you can switch between single, continuous, and manual focus. That is quite nice. And the button inside changes between your autofocus mode. On the left-hand side as well, you have a little lock switch, which is quite cool. So if you have your settings dialed in, lock it out, and then all of your dials don't function, and it gives you a little warning on the screen to say that you're locked out. Very nice if you're prone to accidentally bumping the rear dial, which I have done on occasion, and that then just throws your aperture out, which is a little bit irritating. But once you start using the lockout, it's perfect. Other than that, look and feel really, really nice. What we did notice though is that the camera does get a little bit hot in continuous use. Again, it could just be because it's a pre-production model, so can't really say if that's an issue or not. We, however, didn't experience any overheating even when we were shooting 4K 60. No problems at all, so I think it's fine. But yeah, literally no complaints in terms of the ergonomics. Good all-round unit. Okay, so that pretty much covers all the specs on the Panasonic S1. So let's jump into some of the images that we snapped and have a quick look. So I'm going to pretty much kick it off where we left off on the specs. We're talking about autofocus. So let's jump straight into a burst sequence and just going to pop them open, and you can really see that we had the camera in continuous autofocus, shooting in its tracking mode. We had locked on our model's face, and he was walking towards us, and we were just doing a quick burst. So if I run through these, I immediately see that the first couple of images are quite sharp. And then as he gets closer to us, they unfortunately lose a lot of that sharpness. And if you're sort of halfway through and you punch in, yeah, definitely didn't maintain the sharpness throughout. The images are usable, but if you had to crop in, yeah, you're definitely not going to maintain that sharpness. Now, again, it is a pre-production model, so any of these things could still be tweaked. You know, there could be firmware updates that fix some of the autofocus issues, and I really hope Panasonic sees to that. But for now, definitely I wouldn't recommend this camera as a sports camera or anything like that. If you're going to shoot video with it or just normal stills, it's fine. But for sport, based on these tests, I wouldn't go there. Okay, so jumping into our next image. So we had our model taking some pictures as well out on the day. And just to put you into perspective, we shot in some really difficult environments. So we were under a tree canopy and there were different, light bouncing through, and it was a little bit tricky, but we really wanted to see what the camera can actually do. So what I've got is just a standard portrait. Our model's just standing there holding his Sony, and I'm just going to punch in straight away. So focus was on his eye, and if we punch in, yeah, the sharpness is great. The camera's detail resolution is perfect. We can see pores and eyelashes and everything, so yeah, I mean, detail pickup through this is really good. And if you take into account that we're essentially shooting with what is going to be the kit lens, that's really, really good. Like, very, very happy. And also it gives you a bit of a contrast as well, because if you're shooting in the burst mode where the autofocus is a little bit hit and miss, when you're shooting single shot and you actually nail the focus, it's perfect. Like, it's really, really solid. So nothing to complain about there. Okay, so for the next image that we're going to highlight here, so our model was kind of hunkering down, and I came around to the front of him and shot a portrait just of him looking through the camera. And what I wanted to point out with this image is that, and we saw it throughout the day, the camera's auto white balance isn't always 100% on point. When it gets it right really, really well. But as you can see in this shot, there's quite a severe green cast, and really, I mean, something that you can fix, if you're shooting in RAW, you can definitely fix it in post. But these images that I'm looking at are just JPEGs, and a very, very definite green cast there, and it's not a single image. I shot about 5 images of our model in this position, and in each and every one of them, that color cast was present. So the white balance isn't 100% right, and that's definitely something to remember, especially if it carries over into your video. Okay, so jumping into our next shot, it's just a side profile portrait, and again, like the complete contrast of what we had with the previous shot. When the camera nails the white balance and the autofocus, it is just gorgeous. If we punch in here, you can see the sharpness is just incredible. Again, you can pick up pores, you can pick up eyelash definition, absolutely everything. Nails it beautifully. Retains good definition in the hair as well. You see individual strands and all that. Really, really impressive when this unit gets it right. And on the back of that, this lens as well. So essentially a kit lens, a 24-105 f4 lens that a lot of you guys are going to pick up as the standard lens with this unit. I mean, look at that. You're getting beautiful definition out of it. You're getting some really creamy bokeh in the background. Instances where the lights are coming through the leaves, you're getting that beautiful circular bokeh effect. Yeah, like really, really solid performance. And leading that over into our next image, just a shot where we have the model standing holding the camera again. And I specifically wanted to go for this one because you're getting a beautiful contrast between a completely blown out background, just overly bright, and the darkness of the camera that he's holding. And there you can see, I mean, you're getting no chromatic aberration out of it, zero purple fringing, really, really solid performance for what is arguably a kit lens. And if the other lenses in the lineup is anything like this, I'm already super happy with what Panasonic has done there. Okay, so let's jump into looking at some of the video footage that was shot with this camera. So right off the bat, I'm just going to say the stabilization is really, really good. Arguably the best in-body stabilization in conjunction with lens stabilization that I've seen in a full-frame camera to date. This is a shot where we're walking backwards and the model is walking towards us, and it is almost as if it was shot on a gimbal. It is super, super smooth. The downside in this shot, and you'll see it immediately, is that the camera loses autofocus. So again, when the model's at a bit of a distance, it's perfectly fine. The moment that you come in and you alter that distance, the camera loses a little bit, and then it takes a little bit too long to lock back in. And that is just going to be a issue with this unit's autofocus, with that contrast detect, no phase detect. Unfortunately, this might not be something that they can fix in a firmware update, but we'll see. Okay, so in this next video clip, we were again just walking and shooting at the same time. We had the lens set at about 70 millimeters, just cropped in on the hand holding the camera as we're walking, and the camera actually did really, really well. The stabilization again is epic, as you can see. It was hunting a little bit for autofocus. We had it set to track the camera specifically using the object tracking, and it actually did okay. Really pretty decent performance, nothing to complain about. Again, the stabilizer performed really well even when zoomed in. Super happy with that. Then the last clip we're going to show you was actually shot in the HLG format, and I'm actually really impressed with this, and so was our videographer of the day. You can see perfect detail throughout this entire image. In the background, in your trees and everything, still retained really good detail. Our model is standing in shadow, and it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so sun is right overhead, really bright, beating down, and the dynamic range is excellent. Now, Panasonic hasn't published any dynamic range figures for this camera yet, and this isn't even with the log profile yet. This is just the built-in HLG, and that's really good. I am well impressed with the performance of this unit in this format. I'd be very happy to shoot in that all day long. Okay, so in conclusion, what do I think about this camera? Well, just straight off the bat, everything that I've seen in the little time that I've had this unit has impressed me. Yes, the autofocus isn't perfect, but other than that, all round, it is phenomenal. It's got amazing in-body stabilization. The lens stabilizer working with that is great. Touchscreen functionality is wonderful. I love the fact that they've included 2 memory card options here. XQD being in there is great. I'm super happy with that. Look and feel performs brilliantly, sits well in the hand, is maybe a little bit heavier than other comparable mirrorless cameras, but you know, it feels good, it feels solid. At the end of the day, for me, that's a little bit more important than just going as small as possible. What really gets me excited about this camera is the fact that Panasonic listened to the critique that was out there. They jumped straight from micro four thirds into full frame, and they absolutely nailed it. And that's a lot more than we can say for some other manufacturers that have stepped into this full frame mirrorless market. As a first entry, this thing ticks almost all the boxes for me. And that gets me excited, you know, when there's a manufacturer that takes their time, does something proper, brings out a truly good system on the first try, gets me excited for what's to come. What's the next camera that Panasonic is going to bring out? I would be very happy stepping into this system right now as a first-time buyer. This would pretty much tick all the boxes for me. And then there's one more thing that I'm going to mention, and that is the viewfinder that they've stuck in this thing. So this viewfinder is running at like 5 megapixels in there. It's an OLED viewfinder. The refresh rate is great. It is super bright and super accurate, and I love it. It is the highest resolution viewfinder that's currently in production, and it works so well. Everything on this camera ticks the right boxes, and I think that Panasonic might have just created the best all-rounder at this price point, and I love it. Well guys, that wraps up our first review on the Panasonic Lumix S1. If you enjoyed that video, as always, please don't forget to drop us a like, comment, or a subscribe. We always love hearing from you guys. Thank you very much.